let's kick off the proceedings. I'm Michael Diamond. I'm the Academic Director of the Integrated Marketing and Communications Department at NYU School of Professional Studies in its Division of Programs in Business. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome all of you students and guests to this speaker series. We're very fortunate to have extraordinary faculty who are able to bring together and animate great experiences for our students in the classroom. And from time to time, we have an opportunity to share them a bit more broadly. And so I'm absolutely delighted that under Tariq Khan's stewardship, we're able to kick off a new series this year called Leadership in Changing Times. And for those of you who followed us last semester, we actually had a good chance to speak to Tariq directly about the contents of his new book with that title and some of the conversations he had. And it also gives us a wonderful opportunity to welcome Doug Hammond to our community. Doug, and you'll find out a ton more about him and his journey, is the chairman and CEO of NFP, which is a leading insurance broker and consultancy firm who engineered a major turnaround and has a lot of sort of wisdom to share about that experience, the role of marketing and branding, corporate purpose, reputation, and everything. So for those of you who are dialed in for video and would like to ask questions, pop the questions in the Q&A. If you're looking at your Zoom screen, towards the bottom of the Zoom screen, you'll see a little Q&A bubble. If you're writing questions there, then I'll pick them up and we'll do some moderation later on. So without further ado, welcome to Doug and to Tariq, and I'll turn it over to Tariq.
Thank you, Michael. Truly appreciate you kicking off this webinar. And this is really a great opportunity. You know, as the times are changing, we have thought about many things, but never thought about doing a classroom, you know, in a blended version. I have 25 students sitting with me in the classroom here at NYU, and then we have many people joining us. So Doug, once again, thank you for your time. As you may remember, you know, when I started writing the book, it was pre-pandemic, and I interviewed you, and it was a great conversation. And then I was done with the book almost 70, 80% by January of 2020. And then you throw in COVID on top of that. So I came back to you and I said, hey, Doug, we need to update the book. And you were kind enough to give your time, and you know, you are in the book. But you have a very impressive background in turnaround leadership, and you have successfully demonstrated that when you took NFP being a penny stock to almost a $5 billion valuation company. I'm sure that COVID is unlike anything. I truly believe that this is the first true world war that we are going through, because this is the first time almost virtually every country has been impacted by that. So the first question that I have is, you know, with COVID being around, and unlike any crisis that any one of us have seen at a global level, please share your thoughts, you know, how you reacted to pandemic, and, you know, what was the cadence that you applied in really keeping your company running and keeping your employees engaged?
Hey, Tariq, thanks for having me. It's an honor. I enjoyed my last talk with you in a live classroom, so I'm happy to be back. You know, to me, in terms of kind of the response, the pandemic was felt a lot like the financial crisis. It came upon us pretty quickly, and we had to respond quickly. I think I was pretty lucky. My brother is married to a Chinese woman, and he was in China in January of 2020 and kind of giving me reports on what was happening there. So I had a little bit of a head start on what was going on and the magnitude of what was going on, and was very keyed into it. The first thing I would say is, as a leader, I would say cry and have all of your panic attacks in your bedroom closet before you kind of go out and kind of face your employees. You want to kind of level set everyone, create a calm for people. You want to be deliberate in controlling fear and emotions, and prioritizing how you need to address what was totally unforeseeable and unknown, and nothing that anyone had ever experienced in modern times. For us, I think the number one thing that we came out of as a management team thinking about response was the safety of our employees. So first and foremost, we need to stabilize the workforce, make sure that they feel that we support them so that they can serve customers that are also in a state of uncertainty and somewhat panicked about what the impact to their business will be. We need to project control and calm as we deal with our customers. So we canceled all conventions, meetings, sales meetings, everything in person in very early in March before many other companies did. That was really just benefiting from my experience listening to my brother who was in China. And then we transitioned, I mean, thanks to the investments that we made in technology and our back office infrastructure, we transitioned 6,000 employees remotely in a period of about 2 or 3 weeks. So we were able to give people a foundation of work in their homes, tell them that we would be flexible in how they dealt with their own issues, and just kind of move through the process. We created a coronavirus critical response team of the most competent leaders within our business to address in a very structured way different components of our business. We built resource platforms for our customers that were unrelated to our business. So we built resource platforms on how to approach and apply for PPE and government opportunities to keep them afloat. We were worried about our customers going out of business and how that would impact our business. We needed to be there for them. We needed to differentiate ourselves. So we created a website that was basically just populated with resources on how to approach resources that would keep their businesses going, access to capital and other governmental measures that were put in place. I think the third thing that we did was protect our balance sheet and our P&L. We stopped all discretionary spending, including acquisitions, and we're an acquisition business. We hit the credit markets to build a war chest of capital. I thought there was going to be opportunity coming from other distressed companies. So we built up a war chest of over $1 billion of capital on the company's accounts so that we would be prepared to address a long-term uncertainty, but also be able to pursue investment opportunities that might come across our way. And the credit markets at that time were wide open and very receptive to us. And I think at the same time, we began to assess risk at all levels within our business and then make business decisions around that risk. We segmented our business. We looked at areas where we had the most exposure, like sports, retail, restaurants, hospitality, travel, transportation. And then we engaged our customers around those areas and looked at where the exposures were and how we could address them as well as possible. So really by focusing on those 4 components, the safety of our employees, calming the troops, getting them into a place where they could serve our customers, creating resources for our customers around the pain points that they may not fully understand or weren't completely aware of, building up the capital and hoarding cash so the company was secure during an extended downturn from an economic perspective, and then evaluating the business and the areas of our revenue that we thought were most exposed were the areas where we focused. We actually ended up coming out of the year with organic revenue. So in all of that, we ended up growing the business. We grow our business at about 5%. This year, we grew our business 10.5% organically. It was a pretty good year. We usually grow our business at about 5%. And during the worst stages of the pandemic, we were able to grow the business by about 2.5%. So a solid performance during the year. And I think we responded well. And I think we won a lot of fans from our customers. I mean, they really kind of we were there for them, and they were grateful.
Great. Doug, in the post-pandemic world, we have seen the changing rules of engagement. Now, leading remotely is a newer skill, especially for the seasoned leaders. Just imagine the class of 2020. They have started working, and they started working remotely. It is projected by 2025, 1 out of 4 people in this country will be working remotely permanently. And how do you lead and engage people? I know you're a very hands-on leader. Whenever I visit your office, I see you have a lot of connection with all your leaders. But how do you lead? What advice do you have for leaders that how do they lead in this post-pandemic, leading remotely?
I haven't completely figured that out yet, to tell you the truth. I think the first thing you need to do is give it to your employees straight. Employees want to know, when are they coming back to work? How are they coming back to work? And I think a lot of leaders have sort of misstepped, as I see it or I witness it, by being very absolute with respect to their expectations of their workforce. I think that's a lot of the reason why the government has gotten into problems. I don't think anybody's been straight enough with citizens or straight enough with employees about acknowledging the uncertainty associated with a moment in history that no one has ever experienced. So when you talk about leading remote employees, you do the best you can in the same way that you did it before. You communicate with them probably more frequently than you communicated with them in the past. You still try to create moments where it's safe for us to gather and it's safe for us to experience one another as people. And you still stay focused on what's most important to them. Instead of kind of guessing what your employees need, listen to them as much as possible. Focus on where they are. Employees today are focused on childcare if they have to come back to the office. They're focused on elder care. They're focused on risks relative to an immunocompromised person that might be living in their household and demands of a workplace where they may have to go in under what they perceive as dangerous circumstances. Whether it's justified or not, that's their perception. Employees are focused on their benefits and their upward mobility and why they should stay engaged with your business and why it makes sense. So I think you still have to meet the employees in the same way that you met them in the past. You just have to focus on communicating your value proposition, communicating your culture, what you believe in, your values, probably more than you did in the past. Because in a real environment, as opposed to a virtual environment, you're able to kind of reinforce in real life and with real life day-to-day occurrences what you stand for and what your values are and why your company is a place where people want to work. And when you're not in the office, you need to just communicate more and you need to be more focused on meeting your employees for where they are.
Yeah, that's great. And I know, Doug, that I've noticed in the pandemic time that you have been very active on the social media, especially LinkedIn and other social media handles. I know you have a very smart marketing maven, chief marketing officer, Eric Boyster. But I was truly impressed, your presence on the social media and especially taking a bold decision on some topics, especially when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know you have been a big supporter throughout your career. But this was really, this was something that I noticed regularly. So tell us, what was your communication strategy? And we have a lot of students who are communication marketing and PR major. So how do you really keep in contact and engaged? How you utilize the social media to your best advantage?
Well, I can tell you, I don't do all of it, but truth be told, but it's interesting when I do actually find the time, either while I'm traveling or in the quiet of my office, when something kind of moves me to kind of post something on my own. It always amazes me on how much more traction I get on social media. It's almost like, social media followers and people that are engaged there, they get sort of what is the stuff that's generated from the company that's kind of consistent with my values and consistent with the company's values, what that is and kind of what I do kind of personally. But I just think it's important to constantly sort of reinforce what you stand for. You want to make sure that people understand that, because you don't want people joining your company that don't stand for the values that are important to you. So thematically, when you see the posts and they see the things that we celebrate that are not tied to the technical aspects of our business, but more tied to community issues, celebrating diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, celebrating people of diversity and people with disabilities and what they've accomplished, I think it sends a message and a tone of sort of what's important to us, and that we're a company that's collaborative, that cares for one another, that's certainly about making money and being profitable and being very disciplined in how we sort of pursue our business strategy, but also kind of brings to that equation a higher purpose of trying to do better and to do good and to impact our communities in a positive way, and to create opportunities for people that have been marginalized, and to do better, particularly in financial services in that way. So I just think that's super important. I think I don't really want people working for my company that don't care about those things. And I think that creates an environment not only where we care for one another in a better and more meaningful way in the workforce, which creates more engagement of our employees, but where we care for our customers in that way. And we actually take to heart what they need, that we don't look to pump products down their throat. We're good listeners, and we listen to what they need, and we try to respond to the troubles and the struggles that they're having in as thoughtful a way as possible. In a business like ours, it's a highly complex business, and we have built a company where everyone that's in front of a customer has hundreds of arrows in the quiver. Nobody has all the arrows sort of on their own. So collaboration and understanding where to draw from the greater resources of the business to serve customers is critical, and that's all about communication. And I think all those elements of how we communicate from a marketing standpoint kind of create a perception and understanding of the business that's not in your face, that says we are this thing. Instead, it's kind of a feeling that you get over time about the business. You know, our chief marketing officer is a guy you know very well, Eric Baster. He reports directly to me. There isn't a single bit of press release or social media coverage, you know, at the corporate level that goes out that I don't see first. Anything that comes through on my name that's created for me sometimes is something that I've reviewed and edited before it's posted. And Eric and I work very closely, and I work closely with our public relations person, Josh Wozeman, and the whole team on a regular basis to really refine what the message of our business is and how we communicate important events externally and how that sort of represents our culture to the marketplace. Eric is also involved. I mean, I know you've got a marketing class and people that are focused on marketing. It's important for those students to understand that in order for marketing to be effective, marketing also needs to be directly involved in sales and sales enablement. Otherwise, there's a disconnect between what you're communicating externally and what you're doing internally. So Eric is actually responsible for sales enablement within the business and aligning the resources around client opportunities. And he's integrally involved in all of the technology that is tied to those activities. How we buy that technology, how we monitor the technology around evaluating how our customers are looking at our website when we issue something out to them through emails, where they're navigating to and what that means and what kind of feedback we can give to our sales force to ensure that we're not wasting our customers' time. Our marketing department is at the heart of all of those things that you wouldn't think are traditionally marketing. But we've pulled them together, and I think it's one of the reasons why we have one of the highest levels of organic growth in our industry. So as I said, we finished up this year with double-digit organic growth across all of our segments. just fantastic performance. And it's really about drawing on the broad resources to serve customers more comprehensively.
Absolutely. I think kudos to your team. And as I said, that this probably gave you a competitive advantage in the marketplace when I saw NFP, coming out with regular communication, taking a bold stand. And I think really engaging employees it's not only that you just put a piece. So your team definitely needs recognition on that. And I know Eric is really on top of it. Now I'm going to ask the next question.
I would say Eric, and we hired a wonderful woman named Pamela Wheeler, who is a
Chief Diversity Officer, right?
Our Chief Diversity Officer, and she's pretty involved in all that in all of those decisions too, and very helpful to keep me aware of what's going on and everything. So Pam's been great as well.
I think that's great. So you have always been an acquisition leader, and I don't know how many companies, hundreds of companies have been acquired by NFP. Now, your team is really bringing them into the common mission of NFP. I think in the next few years, we will see a lot more acquisition, not only from your company, but other companies, because with the challenges, the big fish will go after the small fishes. How do you continue that mission of acculturation when you bring a company from outside with a completely different culture? How do you really convince them, or how do you go through that process where they really come a part of the similar culture that you have created at NFP? I know you have been very successful in the past, but now going in the future, a lot of work would be remote. So what are some of the opportunities that you see as a leader?
Well, as I said before, we try to communicate our culture and our values on a regular basis in a public forum. When we think about acquisitions, we think about focusing on businesses that are profitable and we think will grow. But we also think sort of as a threshold matter, what is the culture and what are the values of the business that we acquire? So we generally acquire businesses where the cultures and the values at a high level are not dissimilar to ours. But we do dig in on those businesses and really try to understand what's most important to the employees. And we try to demonstrate to those employees where are we aligned and what is different. And if there are things that are different, but that are really good that we didn't think of, then we absorb that component of their culture and we make it part of our culture. And we also don't try to quash what they're doing for their local communities by having sort of a national agenda relative to what we think is really important from a community standpoint. We do have some national charities that we support and national initiatives, particularly around the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives. But there's tons of stuff that's happening that the acquisitions and the employees keep. I think they like that about NFP. I think that's part of our culture, that we kind of accept what's important to them as well. As far as kind of trying to do that in a remote environment, as soon as there's a window and the positivity rates are low enough, I'm on a plane and I go out and I meet the acquisitions and I meet the employees and I talk to them. And thankfully, that's more often now than it had been over the course of the past month or so. But we still get out there and still just try to over communicate. I don't really know any other way to do it. I think I have a philosophy of sort of over communication on these points. I think part of the agenda in an environment that's more remote is for me to constantly emphasize with the people that work with me and for me that over communication is necessary, probably more necessary in an environment like this. And then we continue to create opportunities where our employees gather in safe conditions. We are, for the first time in 2 years, doing a 1,000-person annual summit meeting in March in Austin, Texas. We haven't done that in 2 years. 1,000 is a little bit short of what we usually do, but we try to create, a somewhat intimate gathering where people are able to experience the business. We focus on emphasizing that new employees join those types of events so they can experience the business and what we're all about. You've got to leverage technology in a more effective way than we have in the past. I think forums like this are really helpful in terms of, being able to see people's emotions and faces. We're getting more and more used to those things. So it's kind of, figure it out in some respects as you go along. I don't really have a playbook for it other than some of the things that we've been talking about.
In the book, you have written that pivot based on your circumstances. So you have always been a flexible leader, more adaptive, and the book theme is about adaptive leadership. And I know there are many old timers, classic leaders who are very rigid in their approach. So what advice do you have for the students sitting in who are going to be future leaders about the flexibility in leadership?
Well, I would say before you're a future leader, you're an employee. And you're probably a bit of a follower. If you're working for a rigid leader or a command and control leader, then find another job. You should be as discerning about your employer as just about anything else professionally. I think being a command and control leader and being a rigid, structured, micromanaging leader is absolutely dead. The world is changing far too rapidly. I always talk about, there's your book, and there's a great book by Stanley McChrystal called Team of Teams, which is about adaptive leadership and gives a whole bunch of great examples and illustrations, and is a fun read about how the complex, dynamic world that we live in requires pivoting. And it's really about the death of long-term strategic planning. That's not to say that we don't think about the future. It's not to say that we don't set kind of a mission around where we want to go and the business that we want to be in the future. It's not to say that we don't have a robust business planning process that occurs every single year and thinks about the next 3 years and focuses specifically on the next year. Things happen every single day in our business that require a pivot from what was planned. And if you're not able to deal with that, then you're not going to be successful. And if leaders are not willing to empower smart people to execute to their own judgment within the context of a broader mission, then the business will fail.
Great. So you also talked in the book about pressure test when things are going well, right? Last 2 years, anybody who didn't do the pressure test in good times obviously didn't have a chance to do this because everyone was hit with this simultaneously, depending on the kind of business. So let's talk a little bit about that. What is your cadence or logic about pressure testing? And I know that we talked about in detail in the book. So let's hear from you that what is the reasoning behind pressure testing when things are going well?
Yeah. I'm an optimistic person, but I've got a lot of pessimism in me. And a little bit of, I would guess a fair dose of paranoia. So when things are going exceptionally well, I just always think that things can't continue on this way. And we need to be prepared for something that's unforeseen. So just to clarify to your first point, we always pressure test our business and say, what if our revenues went down 5, 10, 15, 20%? How would we respond? What are the levers of the business for us to kind of pull in order to be ready quickly to pivot to a more conservative model? So the things that I talked about, I think in response to your first question, like what are our cash balances? What's our cash burn within the company? What can we stop burning from a cash perspective? How do we protect our balance sheet? How do we reduce and eliminate all discretionary spending within a business in the event of an unforeseen emergency? We relied on all of our prior pressure testing in order to execute on those things very, very quickly during the pandemic. So then there are the pieces of kind of how the pandemic impacts your business that require crisis management in the moment and pressure testing based on a new set of factors. I mean, I can tell you what I wanted to do and what we did very, very quickly out of the box. We kind of stepped back and we said, okay, well, we know the things that we know based on our prior activities and pressure testing activities. We executed on them. Now we have to think about what's the impact of our business. And in order for us to understand the impact on our business, we really only had to understand what is the impact on our customers. So the first thing we did was look at what sectors of the economy are going to be impacted most. Now we have a very large sports business, the NHL, Major League Baseball, some of the NBA's business, the NFL, the NCAA, the TPA, all of those are big customers of ours. It's a big business for us, sports across the board. Sports business, spectator sports, I mean, they got crushed during the pandemic. We need to evaluate how did that impact our business, right? Restaurants, hospitality, travel, transportation, all of these things. We looked at those sectors. We had to assess what our exposure was to those sectors and then make business decisions around those sectors in order to protect the business and understand what their impact was to our business. And then we started to understand that the impact of COVID was kind of a sweeping impact that impacted different zip codes at different times. So we actually partnered up with Boston Consulting Group, and Boston Consulting Group helped us build a model that gave us an understanding down to zip codes, and based on the data that was available, what areas of our business would be shut down most and what could be impacted the most at any given time based on flare-ups in hospital activity across the country. So we were able to look at that and then also manage risk within our own offices and risk to our customers on a zip code basis, in addition to the business sector basis. So, you know, what I would say is you just need to step back and think thoughtfully about the type of information that you need to make decisions around your business that are smart under any given circumstances, and then execute on them very quickly. And I always say, I think you've heard me say this before, leaders are leaders because they have to make decisions that have very difficult answers, and the decisions are often unknown. I think kind of the higher the title, the more difficult the decisions are that come to your plate. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. If you have the right governance model and governance structure within your business, decisions that sort of can be made at a different level wouldn't come up to you. They should be dealt with at a different level. And decisions that are above my head are made by my board of directors. And it's a community of people that make those decisions. So it's important to weigh the facts. It's important to have access to good data, a basis for why you're getting that data, and then make the decisions and send your workforce off to address it, and then monitor results. And if you've made the wrong decision, and there's probably a good chance that you may make the wrong decision because they're hard decisions, just pull back from it and make another decision until you find out what the right path is. So I think in a crisis, you know, they're hard decisions. You have to find the path. You need to try things and extract the data around your decision-making process to know whether or not it's the right decision.
Doug, I know that you have been a big believer in promoting from within. We are working with a generation, you know, and I want to be careful in saying that they see loyalty in the workplace very differently. They're very comfortable changing companies every 2 or 3 years. And obviously they don't get a chance to demonstrate their skills in one company, and the reason they change because they can find companies do that. So what advice do you have for the next gen that is getting into the workforce, the young professionals? You know, what are some of the things in terms of staying at a company, or how often, and what are some of the things that you look in people when you're looking to promote them from within or outside?
Well, first, I guess I'll address it in parts. In terms of the loyalty to your company and that whole issue of the Great Resignation and all the rest of it. I was not a particularly loyal employee before I found the right job and a place where I thought that I would have more opportunity and where I really enjoyed the people that I worked with and where I was engaged. I bounced around quite a bit looking for opportunities. So I think looking for opportunities and looking for more opportunity and looking for a better workplace is smart. I think that's smart, whether it's the pandemic or it's not the pandemic. I think staying someplace that you don't like, or staying someplace that's not going to satisfy your career objectives or your lifestyle balance objectives, or your financial objectives, that's just not a smart move. You should be doing that. And your employer owes it to you to create an environment that responds to what your needs are as best as we can. If there are people in my company that aren't providing professional development guidance and opportunities for highly performing employees and engaging with the employees on a regular basis, virtually or in the office, then those managers aren't really doing their job. And it applies to my company, it applies to all companies. I just think that you got to do what's best for you, and your employer needs to be responsive. And the employers that win are the ones that create a really great workplace and are addressing the needs of the employees in any environment. So I kind of think that's a starter from my perspective. It's what puts the pressure on us to continue to up our game in terms of employee engagement and the value of working for NFP. And I would say we do our best, and we don't get it right every time. And when you do a lot of acquisitions, there are pockets of areas that you haven't impacted in the right way, and maybe they're culturally inconsistent, and it takes some time to kind of turn that and pay attention to it until you learn about it. So I think in our company, it works in the majority of the places, and it doesn't work everywhere. And it's our job to try to make it work in more places. So that's kind of my view on the Great Resignation and all of that. I think promoting from within is part of it. I think that when you make a statement that you prefer to promote from within, you're making a statement that loyalty within a business and performance within a business is rewarded. I think sometimes managers are reluctant to promote from within because they think that the skill sets of the individuals beneath them or around them, they might be able to find something that's a more perfect fit for a role or a function internally. I've always been a view that nobody should be ready for a promotion, frankly. You need employees that want a promotion and are excited to kind of learn the other 15 or 20% that the promotion entails, and maybe to look at it in a different way and to advance it. So, I think it ups the game. For me, I always remember it upped my game when I changed jobs, and it upped my game within NFP every time I had a new job or a new promotion. I started in the legal area. I moved to the compliance area. I ended up being head of strategy. I worked as the chief operating officer for a period of time. I worked in acquisitions. I never really had all the goods to do the job that I was asked to do, but it was fun and it was a challenge to learn more and do it. So when you promote from within, you create an environment where people are excited about the opportunity that awaits them. And when they see that, they know that you're committed to it. So that's why I kind of believe in it fundamentally. I would say, though, what I have found is that my philosophy and thoughts have evolved a little bit since we've spoken. And part of that is because I've our business has gotten more complex, and there are areas in our business where the skill sets just don't exist. So we have actually hired a bit more from the outside to bring in new perspectives and to test our logic a bit. I think that's necessary too. But I would hope that 75% of the opportunities within from a promotion perspective are coming from inside our company.
Got it. And last question before we go to Q&A with the students. In the book, I've talked about 11 traits of leadership, that includes your vision, your tenacity, your commitment, servant leadership, transparent communication. So all the traits leaders have. Now, in your opinion, during the pandemic, what are some of the traits that really help you the most to navigate through these challenges?
I think communication. Communication and honesty. Because I think that when, I witnessed a lot of executives just saying, everybody's back to the office on this day, and that's when it's going to happen. And if you don't come back, you risk losing your job and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I can see that in the context of healthcare. I can see it in the context of areas where it's just a different type of business than mine. But in a business that's really a professional services context, setting forth those types of kind of like absolutes that just are going to be adjusted in the future damages credibility, and it's not being honest. So, starting from a place where like, wow, this is really not something that I've ever experienced, and I'm going to do my best to make really good decisions, but some of those decisions are going to be wrong, and bear with us, and we're here to listen. I think it went a long way in keeping the workforce stable. We also had a lot of unanticipated, and I think everybody knows this now, but in early stages of this, a lot of mental health issues, a mental health crisis, and we ramped up our employee assistance areas in that regard and really stood behind a lot of our employees that were struggling with the circumstances. I think that was a big thing for us too. So that over communication on a regular basis and honesty, I think more than anything else is important. I mean, the other stuff I think managers are built to do, executives are built to evaluate their cash flow and business impact. And, if you have access to capital, get as much capital as possible because you don't know what the hell is going to happen, which we did all those things. I think that's kind of like the tactical meat and potatoes of just being sort of like, a smart business person. I think the harder part are the softer parts of the job that sort of help you engage your workforce with a degree of humility and compassion and honesty. And more than anything else, I think that's what people want, particularly, you can't really buffalo people and kind of pretend that everything's okay when people are kind of like trying to balance, a baby in the background and talking to a customer and kids home from school and trying to get their homework done. It's and health issues associated with COVID and the fear of it. You just need to be sensitive to all those things and talk about all those things so that people at least think, hey, they're going through it too. I was too, I've got a 91-year-old mom who lives down the block from me, and I'm her primary caretaker with my wife. And, trying to keep her in the house and keep her safe and keep my kids away from her and having her understand that, and talking about that with the employees. All that stuff I think it goes a long way to just kind of humanize the situation when everybody's struggling. And, we could see it because we get data feeds around when our employees are logging in, but employees, they put the kids to bed, and you'd see sort of the flow of activity and logins happening at 9:00 at night, people getting back on top of their work and responding to their customers and doing it in very kind of non-traditional ways. You need to accept that too and celebrate it. So those are the areas that I think were at least most important from my perspective. Obviously, the technical aspects of doing the job and not dropping the ball and all of those things are important. The softer side of kind of addressing what was coming out of the pandemic, I think, was a unique characteristic of our business that helped us.
My take is, giving an outside opinion, knowing you, I think besides your transparent communication, the two things that I know, because I met a lot of your leaders as well, I think that stood out to me for your leadership trait was your empathy and your intuition. Empathy is because how you reacted to people and understanding that, there are working moms and there are working dads, and also really humanizing was a very big element that stood out, as an NFP, as a company. And this is based on my, conversation with some of your leaders, and also the intuition that how to turn around a company during these challenging times. Now we're in the home stretch, last 13 minutes left. So I would like to invite some of the students from the classroom. They'll come introduce themselves and they'll ask the question directly. I don't know what they're going to ask. So, let's welcome, who wants to go first? Come up here.
Doug. My name is Clara. So I have a question for you. So when you're the CEO of a company, it's obviously like hard to connect with all the people in your company, especially if you have a really big one. So you might feel a little bit like isolated from all the information in the field. So how do you make sure that this doesn't happen and that your employees feel comfortable coming up to you, either with good or bad news?
I go out of my way to try to do that. I can tell you, I think I was like the third or fourth employee at NFP back in 1999. So it was easy to know all the employees back then. And I think the biggest risk of my company, people talk about cyber attacks and they talk about all these other factors, the economy and interest rates and things like that. I think the biggest risk to our company and one of the biggest benefits is scale and getting bigger, because it's harder to engage and be connected to employees for that reason. I kind of go out of my way if I'm at an employee function to make sure that I sit at a table that where I don't know anybody, and to ask everybody questions and to encourage a conversation. I reach out on a regular basis to employees that connect with me through social media. We have an internal kind of social media thing called Workplace, which is kind of Facebook's version on the inside of a company, where I'm pretty engaged and can talk to people. If I see something cool, I'll pick up the phone, or interesting, I'll pick up the phone and call an employee and engage them directly. But I try to make sure that it's okay to, I think it's weird for me anyway, that employees would be reluctant to send me an email or ask me a question. And I always say that so that they don't think that it is. But sometimes I do feel isolated, and sometimes I don't feel like I'm getting enough flow as the company gets bigger. And the pandemic has made it difficult for me to kind of meet as many folks personally. And that frustrates me. It kind of depresses me a little bit when I don't get out and kind of engage people a lot. That's kind of the, that I guess my gasoline or my solar power. But I like that. I like that part of it. And I try to tell the employees that I like that, so that they feel like they can approach me. I feel like, I get a version of events from my executives that report to me. But some of my best ideas come from the field. They come from sitting down and talking to people, like, what are your pain points? What technologies are they using that you don't get access to through my company? What do you see our competitors doing? Tell me about like the last opportunity that you lost and why. Where have we fallen down? What are the pain points around our technology platform? Try to kind of call out questions and responses that help people engage and let them know that it's okay to tell me stuff that's not so good. And I think by creating a dialogue like that, people don't worry about it as much. But I still do get the sense, and it always kind of amazes me, like sometimes I'll go to an employee meeting and I'll talk to an employee and they're like nervous when they're talking to me. I'm still kind of surprised by that. It still kind of gets me. I understand it, but that's not what I want at all. I want people to feel comfortable.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Those who are on remotely, they can also put the question in chat box, and we'll have one more question from the classroom.
Hi, is it on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tali. And my question is, like, how do you go about the growing interest in hybrid work? Like now that we're kind of knee deep into the pandemic, and now we're kind of talking about what's next and what's the future of that. So how are you currently dealing with that? Especially when employees are also talking about leaving companies, and like that drive for work is kind of changing gears a bit. So how are you navigating that, or how will you?
Are you talking about things like wage inflation and how to basically deal with compensation issues?
More so like just hybrid work environments, like now that people are going back into the office.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And like just the growing need, I guess people are being more vocal about how they like to work. And
Oh, hybrid. Okay.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think, like I mentioned, I would say that in my business, there generally are no absolutes. So I don't really mind a hybrid work environment. The way we kind of are mapping it out, I think we'll have 20% of our workforce that will probably be mostly remote. And we'll have like 40% that kind of want to have some exposure to the office, like between 2 and 3 days. And then we have plenty of them, like another 20 to 25% that want to be in the office full time because they live in a city and they don't have a big apartment maybe, and they've got a young kids at home. So they welcome like kind of a separate workplace. We've actually like begun to design all of our new offices around kind of a different type of work environment that creates a better kind of workplace for a hybrid kind of lifestyle. There are some businesses within NFP, like we have some call centers and some areas where being in the office is more important, and we're more rigid about that. And unfortunately, we have lost some employees because of that. But generally, where we can be flexible and we can kind of understand what the issues are for the employee, we're going to accommodate. I think that it's up to managers to be a bit more proactive in assessing the performance of the workforce in any type of environment than for us to kind of restrict employees to sort of an environment where managers have to actually see them. I always kind of thought it was ridiculous when I was young. I always remember this, but I started out working for some big law firms and some other places, and we had executives or senior partners that would like get in early and walk the halls to see who was in the office. And then they'd stay late and they'd walk the halls. And the younger employees like me would sort of be like, oh my gosh, I wasn't here early enough, or I should have stayed later because he didn't see me in my office, and maybe that's bad for me. But I used to think how stupid that was, because a lot of times I would go home to like, see my kids when they were little, and then I'd put them to bed and tell them a story. And then I'd do my work until like midnight. And like nobody saw me doing that, if I had something really important to do. So I don't really think like the optics of being in the office are that important. I also think that there's a lot of kind of like this diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging stuff is bringing out a lot of like, people get promoted because they hang out with their supervisor a lot and their friends. I think it's important to develop relationships, but if you happen to have a supervisor and like, they like to play golf and they like to go out for beers after work, and you happen to be the person that's doing that, that's actually going to be like not the best way to pick the next supervisor, but it happens a lot. So in some respects, it kind of creates a more objective environment to create a performance metric where everybody's kind of playing by the same rules. It's good to develop relationships and it's good to have great communication and to try to engage your supervisors and your coworkers. But I think a lot of that stuff actually is, you talk about pay equity, you talk about all these types of things. Some of that inequity comes from relationships that are tied to things that are unrelated to performance. And that's why I think kind of creating a more consistent metric around how people are evaluated that's driven by more of a remote or hybrid workplace ultimately could be a real positive around some of these DEIB initiatives. So look, I think it is what it is. It's like here to stay. Some people, particularly commercial real estate executives, say, oh, everybody's coming back and it's all going to be the same. Like, no way is it going to be the same. If I told everybody they had to be back in the office, in 2 months, half my workforce would walk out the door and go to my competitor. So that is not happening. And people are, you have to basically take it for granted that like the vast majority of people that work for you, if you choose them in the right way and you select them in the right way, they're highly responsible people that are going to get their work done. And maybe every once in a while they have to go pick up their kid at a soccer match and then come back to their work or something like that. But you should be able, if they're doing that all the time, or like, there's a gap of like 6 hours every day, and you hear that somebody's like, out on their boat for 6 hours and not at the office all the time, then you just have to make the right management moves and terminate that employee. But for the most part, I think that you just have to get better at managing and observing performance from a remote place. So that's how I think about it.
And thank you, Doug. And I know we ran a little over time, but Michael, I'm going to give it back to you. And Doug, I want to thank you so much. And I'm truly committed to get you back in the classroom, hopefully in fall semester, because you only blocked from our university. So Michael, if you can take it from here.
Yeah, well, I want to thank Doug, you very, very much for joining us. It's always wonderful for our students to hear from people who've been in the trenches and, really having impact at an organizational and strategic level, because, all of our students are there learning and studying and practicing and sort of trying to aspire to those positions. And I appreciated too your comments about what, about the operationalization of marketing, and its closeness to the sales enablement and the, more broadly, the growth drivers of the business, which is sometimes where marketing slips up or PR slips up. So I appreciated you making that connection. I want to do a little shout out for an additional event we have coming up. I want to thank Tariq very much for his leadership and kicking off this series. I know he himself, I'm sure, would be very interested in this upcoming talk we have, given his deep work in diversity marketing and his work globally. We've invited Jason Council, who's the newly appointed head of culture at the Gersh Agency. Gersh Agency is one of the well-known sort of talent agencies in the entertainment and media world. And he's going to talk about the intersection of social impact and branding. So, how some of those elements come together, including around issues like diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I want everybody who, attended today just to know about that. But most importantly, I really want to thank you on behalf of the students and just reinforce what Tariq said. We'd love to see you back in person sometime on campus. You'd be more than welcome. We usually have some kind of tchotchke to hand out, so we wouldn't want you to go missing on that. So anyway, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Great. I think when I finish, we'll all sort of disappear, Tariq. So if you're in your class, you've probably got more class to do. But once we're done here, the screen will go. And I want to thank all of our participants for joining as well. So,
thank you, Doug.
Thank you.